The following is a look at the killers of Dead by Daylight, and any real-world equivalents they might have. Let's continue. Herman Carter, aka The Doctor. There's this insufferably pompous attitude that villains need to be complex in one form or another. A good villain, an effective villain, needs to be somewhat understandable or likeable, or at least relatable. They need to have nuance, depth, and this and that. And if you disagree, there's the implication that you're not very intelligent. I have at least a small idea of what real-world irredeemable malevolence looks like. It's not unrealistic. It's not one-dimensional, if you're capable of taking a closer look. But outside of reality, I'm totally fine with fictional villains that are totally evil, and I'm tired of the pretense of people who claim not to. It's interesting. It's fun. It's the Doctor. Although you could argue that the Trapper was sadistic or the Nurse was twisted, these characters do have a degree of nuance, and that's not a bad thing. I like these characters as well. I like many different motivations for villainy, and it's a shame I have to dedicate so much time to spelling this out. Some are sympathetic. Some are very sympathetic. Some are not. Herman Carter begins the sporadic trend, sans Michael Myers, of Dead by Daylight killers who are utterly irredeemable, and I think the law is much stronger because of it. We already have quite a diverse collection amongst the rogues gallery, so let's take a look at pure wickedness. For most of DBD's killers, we do learn about their trauma histories in childhood and or adolescence. For Carter though, no known beatings from Daddy, no known negligence from Mummy. We know very little about Herman Carter's past, and yes, we don't know anything about the, say, Nurse's formative years either. But we at least know of her tragedy and have some insight into her twisted motivation. Now, I will say, amongst serial killers, the typical trauma history is indeed severe, if not extreme. But then again, there are a significant percentage of serial killers who have trauma histories no more traumatic than most of us. Some of us were bullied or neglected or are neurodivergent. It's relatively normal in this cruel world, and most of us don't gravitate to serial murder. And then again, there's a minority of serial killers with very little or even no known trauma history at all. You could well say they are simply evil. For my project, Richard Cottingham, Charlene Gallego and Clifford Olson are the starkest examples of this. And it seems the Doctor shares their company, even if they have little else in common. The Doctor has even less in common with medical serial killers like we've already discussed. There is no pretense with the Doctor, he is no angel of mercy, and he is a serial killer in the standard sense. But his killing is about work, and it's institutional, not as a rogue element. He's more like a Nazi experimenter or a Soviet mad scientist than a typical serial killer. Let's take a closer look at his tome lore. We see someone with very elitist attitudes, someone consumed with contempt for people he deems inferior. He does indeed have high intelligence and Carter is somewhat in control of himself. There was an impulsive attack on Good Doctor with a plank of wood, and Carter does get heavily invested in fantasy, but he's still in control of his faculties. Sort of. And it's not as if we learn completely nothing about him. He experimented with subliminal messaging on his own parents, and there was an incident where he tried to put a mouse's brain into a rabbit. It's not clear how old he was when he did that, but I'm tagging him as an infant zoo sadist. Back in the present day, and Carter would brutally torture and brainwash Good Doctor into becoming a murderer. This is perhaps a dozen deaths at Carter's hands, using someone else as a murder weapon in a way Charles Manson could only dream of. After his arrest, Carter was recruited by the CIA in a move not too dissimilar to Operation Paperclip, which is even referenced in the tome, alongside MK Ultra. While working for the CIA, Carter tortured and killed an unknown number of people over an unknown length of time. When the lab was investigated, the investigative body found everyone dead, and the supervising doctor, Otto Stamper, with his brain fried. It's not known what exactly happened, or how and why Carter went apparently completely insane, as opposed to mostly insane. Either way, Carter definitely steps it up to cruel and unusual. Herman Carter is the most psychopathic and deranged killer so far by a long shot, and his obsession is his work. He is goal-oriented and not limited by the restraints of normal people. He's effectively colourblind to empathy, morals, and even human decency. Amidst all of this, we have to remember this is based off a real person, Chinese doctor Yang Yongxin, who would experiment with electroshock therapy to treat gaming and internet addiction. And the survivor introduced with Carter was a Chinese esports star. Needless to say, Yang Yongxin is a despised figure amongst China's gaming community. Perfect fodder for a villain. The original Larry's was even Chinese. So, what does Herman Carter suffer from? Although he is impulsive, emotionally dysregulated, lacks remorse, and has no regard for the rights or safety of others, I don't think he quite fits the bill of being an antisocial personality disorder, although you could certainly make the case. But he isn't motivated by anger so much as contempt, and seems too organised and controlled and high-functioning to have the temperament of a secondary psychopath, although, yes, this does happen. But he's too professional to be equated with a common thug. Factor 1 psychopathy is much more appropriate. The Doctor is grandiose, narcissistic, prone to boredom, a manipulator, and, as previously stated, lacking in empathy, remorse, or guilt. But I don't know just how shallow his affect is. He does seem somewhat driven by emotion, or at least mania, as well as his intelligence. As previously stated, he is goal-oriented, which is a typical factor in Factor 1 psychopaths. I had considered the possibility the Doctor suffered from narcissistic personality disorder, and like ASPD, you can make the case, but he doesn't have that entitled, envious, or even attention-seeking behaviour we'd expect to see in pathological narcissists. So again, the straitjacket doesn't quite fit. Carter would certainly score above 30 on Robert Hare's PCLR, but he's a mix of everything. It's strange how a killer so apparently unrealistic could be so very realistic. The Doctor is easily one of the least realistic and most cartoonishly evil of all the characters in this game. And that's fine. Sometimes we like our villains to be pure, uncomplicated evil. It's what makes them so fun. The Doctor isn't a representation of anything. Maybe an especially career-oriented Factor 1 psychopath with a very select set of ideals. It's a stretch. He's probably not a Factor 2 psychopath or suffering from ASPD, but I'd like to take a moment to discuss another subtype of narcissist, the cerebral narcissist. The cerebral narcissist cultivates narcissistic supply, that is attention, via his intelligence, and even by using his voice. He's an insufferable intellectual, kind of like a particularly mean-spirited autist. Sam Vaknin has a lot more to say about cerebral narcissism, and anyone who's interested should check him out. Could Herman Carter fit this bill? Again, it's problematic. The 9 symptoms of NPD may or may not still be present, and we don't know too much about the Doctor's past. It's just one thing that makes him so unrealistic. Ironic, given he's actually based off a real person. Perhaps Jan Yoksin is also an especially career-oriented Factor 1 psychopath with a very select set of ideals. I really don't know. I do know medical psychopaths are somewhat different breed to the rogue predator or spree killer types, and I doubt the real-world inspiration, however horrific, is this crazy. By the same token, I can't think of many serial killers that used electrocution as a means of torture. I think one of the Hillside Stranglers may have tried, but it's also not a very practical means for most psychopaths. Also, there's still Keith Jesperson's dad, and I'm still not clear what was going on there. I feel like I should have more to work with, but I'm not getting a spark. Herman Carter's special power is that he shoots electricity. I suppose the entity endowed him to be some kind of living cattle prod. It's awesome. Consequently, he's very happy to be in this realm, able to experiment and indulge his sadism forever. So I'm not clear why the entity felt the need to mess up the Doctor's face, Clockwork Orange style. If it was to enforce compliance, I don't think it was necessary. As we'll see later, other killers willingly work without being tortured themselves. Some of our villains look at this imprisonment as an opportunity. The Doctor is one of them, so it's still scary, not gonna lie. The Doctor's power can also be tweaked with an excellent array of add-ons. Not quite as flexible as the legendary arsenal of the Wraith, but still pretty close. And it does a good job of merging gameplay and story, as many of these add-ons are Carter's notes detailing what he's doing and why, and the chess pieces which speak of his self-imposed intellectualism. I do have a confession to make. I was pissy at the rework a few years back. I thought it would ruin him, but instead it made him great. He's less awkward to use. I remember when he had to manually change between treatment mode and punish mode instead of just zapping. What was the point of that? Even better, the Doctor is more competitive after the rework, going from low-tier trash to maybe mid-tier, depending on who you ask. But best of all, he became less annoying to go against. There were some builds which were downright sadistic, in a bad way. I mean, sadistic in the other bad, you know what I mean. Point is, they don't exist anymore. I will say, however, that his chase theme is grating, and DBD usually does excellent music. Regardless, the Doctor is still one of my favourite characters, and will likely remain so for a long while.